Hello YouTubers, this is Sophomore Bob with my very first YouTube video, and my very first video will be Sliver Deck Tech. Keep in mind that the tribal base that I used was the Naya tribe. This will fit in most all of the Sliver creatures except for the Siphon Sliver. Now I did add blue into the mix just for Gale Rider because Gale Rider is a great end game. Please ignore my cat. Now, I'll start this off by telling you the lands. Now, first lands will be 3 basic forests, 3 basic plains, 3 basic mountains, 4 temple gardens, and 4 sacred foundries. Now, these sacred foundries happen to be proxies, just because the sacred foundries that I'm using currently are in another deck. I will make that deck tech after I've perfected my deck. The last of them will be Temple of Abandon, 2, and 1 Is It Guildgate. Now you ask, why only 1 Is It Guildgate? Well, you see, Gale Riders can come out via my mana wefts, which I run 4 of in this current deck. And usually I only run the 4. But recently I decided that the Is It Guildgate will give me a primary source of blue, so I don't always have to rely on drawing 4 cards. Now I can draw 5 cards and still get it out. Also, to help get them out will be the Domri Raid that I put into the deck. So as you can see, I run 4 Gale Riders, just in case I need that endgame smash. For instance, you can also have them open so that you can block the mono black Desecration Demon that I know gets under a lot of people's nerves. Also, we have 3 Magma Jets here to kill off any pesky mana dorks or anything that you possibly really don't like that you want to kill. And the Scry 2 helps. You have Spear of Heliod. I only run 1 of these just for the ability of +1/+1 in case I don't have Predatory out. Also, the Destroy Target Creature. The Desecration Demon swings at you, or maybe 2. You activate the spear and kill 1 without having to sack any permanents creatures. Now I also run 4 Boros Charms. Same reason, 1 of these is a proxy just because it's in another deck. And I didn't feel like buying other Boros Charms. The Boros Charm is very useful because it can do 4 damage to a direct player's face, which I have used to do a lot of endgame. Also is a great counter to Supreme Verdict, or Cleaner Cleansing, or Dreadbore, or any destruction spells that are in Standard. Even though Supreme Verdict says it cannot be countered, you are efficiently countering it by making your creatures indestructible, which, by the rule change, is now a keyworded ability so that they gain indestructible until end of turn, which means it is now a part of the creature. It cannot be taken off. So, I also run an assortment of slivers. I run 4 Sentinel Slivers, which are 2/2s, which give all slivers that you control vigilance. Now, going back to the older slivers, the older slivers text said, all slivers get this ability. In the M14 slivers, it says, slivers you control have blank. Meaning that if I control a mana weft, and they control a Bone Scythe sliver, Bone Scythe sliver, by the way, gives double strike to all slivers I control. Mana weft has the ability that says, slivers you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Now, going back to the example, if I have a mana weft and they have a Bone Scythe, I am the only player that can tap my slivers for mana as long as I control the mana weft. He, my opposing player, or she, cannot tap Bone Scythe, their Bone Scythe, 4 mana of any color. This being because of the new way the text is worded. Because it's not a Sliver I control. He does not control my mana width. I do not control his bone size. So I no longer have double strike. Now, I also have put in Predatory Sliver, which Sliver creatures you control get +1/+1. He is a 1/1, so when he comes into the battlefield, he is a 2/2. And everything else, any other Sliver that you bring in is either 2/2 or 3/3. Or if there's a 3/3 or a 4/4, it comes in as a 4/4, 5/5, etc., etc. Now, it's always great to have a mountain in play and play turn 1 Striking Sliver. You might not be able to attack with it, but say you have turn 2 Predatory Sliver, you're swinging for 2 on turn 2, and it's first strike. So, it's pretty good. So, we'll go over the Slivers I have here. I have 4 copies of Bone Scythe, which gives all Sliver creatures you control double strike. For if you who are not familiar with double strike is an ability that is first strike plus an additional regular combat step. So, if someone has a 2/2 on the field, and I'm attacking with my 2/2 Bone Scythe, I attack, he blocks with his 2/2, his 2/2 will die via first strike damage. Then I will move to my regular damage step. Seeing that the creature is already dead, I do no damage. Now, if you were playing with the Trample Sliver, then you'd only have to assign 2 damage. You'd move to your regular combat step. Since there's no creature there, trample damage would be 2. Now, moving on to the next one is Thorncaster Sliver. Thorncaster Sliver, creatures you control have, whenever this creature attacks, it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Now, some people that are new to the game can be confused by these keyworded wordings. So, the keyword here is whenever it attacks. So, if I move to combat step and I attack with them, and then my opponent says, yes, they attack, all their abilities trigger. So, if I attack with 2 Thorncasters, then I would deal 4 damage to them. This being, the Thorncaster ability does indeed stack. So, if I attack with a Striking Sliver and 1 Thorncaster Sliver, they will both trigger to deal 2 damage to a creature or player. This can be separated. I can deal 1 damage to a creature, 1 damage to a player, 2 to a creature, or 2 to a player. So, for instance, if I have 2 Thorncasters on the field and a Striking Sliver, and I attack with all 3 of them, the first Thorncaster will do 2 damage, the second Thorncaster will do 2 damage, and the Striking Sliver will do 2 damage to player or creatures your opponent player controls. This is very helpful, especially with the stacking effect. Now, I also run 4 Predatory Slivers, which gives each Sliver +1/+1. This also does stack. If I have 2 Predatories on the field, if I have 2 Predatories, they are both 3/3s. Blur Sliver is also essential because it gives creatures haste, which is great for if you play an end turn Blur Sliver to swing out. Another thing to keep in mind is Domri Raid. Domri Raid is very helpful. I run 2 in this deck, and I run 2 Domri Raids in this deck. Domri says, look at his +1 says, look at the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. Now, when it says you may reveal it, it means that if it's a creature card and you want to put it in your hand, you then reveal it. If you're not going to put it into your hand, you don't reveal it. And if it's not a creature, you don't reveal it and you just put it on top of your deck. Now, if you don't reveal it and it's a creature, you just put it on top of your deck. His -2 ability is target creature fights another target creature. This can be your own creature fighting one of your own creatures. This can be your opponent's creature fighting your creature, which is very helpful. For instance, if they have an Ash Zealot, and I have a Striking Sliver with 2 Predatories on the field. I have a 3/3 Striking Sliver, and I will, instead of attacking and him not blocking, I can make it fight and then attack. His -7 is very great, even though Slivers give almost all of those abilities. You make an emblem. Creatures you control have double strike, trample, hexproof, and haste. Even though we have the haste and double strike covered, the trample is on the another sliver that I'm not running because it is a converted mana cost of 7. Now hexproof does help because it also helps against Esper, meaning that they can't like far and away it, or they can't like Azorius charm it. It's very helpful. Now, Sentinel Sliver gives them vigilance, which is great because this means that you can be aggro to the max, but also have blockers. Because everyone knows that you always need blockers in some situations. Like I said before, this is the Naya build, but I run 4 Gale Riders for the end game. Now, for instance, say your opponent has a field full of 1/1 Elspeth soldier tokens. You can't attack because they don't have trample. Say you don't have Domri Emblem on the field. You don't have trample. He'll just keep chump blocking with his 1/1s. So, he doesn't have Elspeth's emblem on the field. Well, you just play 1 Gale Rider and swing. Maybe that ends the game, maybe it just speeds it up. It's great. Now, I believe I've gone over every sliver. We will move on to the sideboard next. Welcome back, YouTube viewers, and like I said, I'm moving on to the sideboard for my Sliver deck tech. Now, the sideboard is mostly protecting slivers. Now, I've been told I run a very interesting sideboard, which is, the first card I run is Glaring Spotlight. Glaring Spotlight states, creatures your opponents control with hexproof can be targeted with spells and abilities you control as though they didn't have hexproof. This is great for getting rid of that one mana dork that has hexproof. And it's always blocking for some reason. It's very great. The second ability on it says, sacrifice Glaring Spotlight. Creatures you control gain hexproof until end of turn and are unblockable this turn. This is very great for endgame. I only run 1 because you generally don't need it, but it's great to have. I run 2 Pithy Needles, and everyone should know what Pithy Needle does, unless you're brand new. Pithy Needle states, as Pithy Needle enters the battlefield, name a card. This means that when it enters, you have to name a card before your opponent has a chance to respond or counter it. So if I play Pithy Needle and they dissolve it, I have to name a card before they dissolve it. So if I play Pithy Needle and I name Elspeth Sun's Champion, then they can counter and respond to it. Second thing I run in it is God's Willing. I run 2 God's Willings. God's Willing states, target creature you control gains protection from color of your choice until end of turn. Scry 1. This is great against if someone's trying to Azorius Charm or far a creature. You also get Scrying. Scrying is also great thanks to the new Theros set. Scrying has come back in new bold colors, especially with the land. It's also great against cards that specifically state a target. It won't protect you against Supreme Verdict because it's a generalization. I run 2 Fogs, and everyone should know what Fog does. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. This means combat damage, meaning damage that would be dealt in the combat steps. This does not mean if I Magma Jet something and then Fog. It does not mean that by Magma Jet's damage is prevented. I run 2 Glare of Heresy, which is exile target white permanent. This is great against getting rid of Elspeth. Sadly, it does not get rid of her emblem because 1, you cannot target it. 2, it is not a white permanent. It's also great getting rid of any other white permanent, such as Detention Sphere. That can be a pain. Next, I run Renounce the Guilds, which is each player sacrifices a multicolored permanent. You run these in this deck because this deck has no multicolored permanents except for Domri Raid, which You generally want to do this when Domri is not out, unless it's in dire consequence. So, for instance, if the only thing that Esper has on the field that's multicolored is a D-sphere, they will have to sack that D-sphere, bringing your creature back. Now, if they D-sphered your Domri, once they sack it, you don't have the option to sack Domri Raid, so he is safe. Next one is Rootborn Defenses. Rootborn Defenses is basically a Boros Charm, except it's only creatures you control are indestructible this turn. First, you populate. So if you want to make adjustments to the Sliver deck tech, such as putting in Hive Stirrings, which I'm probably going back to, but if you do, that means you get to populate another Sliver token. Now, the last card I run is Fate of Antiquity, which states, exile target artifact or enchantment. Great with getting rid of gods, D-sphere, and anything else that is in the current state. I also have one Domri emblem, but that is foreseen. I would like to thank all of you for viewing my very first deck tech, and hope you enjoyed it, and hope some of you actually make a Sliver deck, whether it be to my exact specifications or an alteration. I do advise not to do Esper. Esper Slivers seem not to work, just because there aren't enough. But it's up to you. Wish you best luck, and I will see you next time. This has been Sophomore Bob, Deck Tech.